cousin Josh and I host the Radford Micro Church. I'm really excited to share my story with you this morning. Before I get started, though, I have a little bit of a disclaimer. I spend most of my time talking to young adults, so if my references fall flat, I'm sorry. We're going to blame that on iGen, okay? So they think I'm funny. I think I'm funny. I hope you will, too. So like I said, I'm married to Josh. We live in Radford. We've lived in Radford for 10 years. Our daughter is Joanne. She's 4. And we have a dog, Charlie, who I like, but Josh doesn't. He's pathetic. Josh is a teacher at the high school, Radford High. He teaches math. I am the Young Life College Director. I've worked at Radford University. I've worked for Young Life for 8 years. And I've volunteered with Young Life since 2009, so for a little over 10 years. So I've spent most of my life, my adult life, in ministry to young people. So that's a big part of my story. So before I get started, I think that everybody's story is unique, and so you have to boil it down a little bit. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you the condensed soup version of my story. And if that's all that you eat, it's going to taste like trash, okay? So, you have to add water. So we're going to say, questions and conversation is going to be the water that you would add to my condensed soup, okay, version of my life. So if something is confusing, you probably just need some more context. I think that the Lord has been incredibly faithful to me. There have been some waypoints along the way of my life that I would like to talk about as I discuss kind of who He is, how He's changed me, and how I came to know Him. So we'll start when I was a kid. I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I lived until I was 18 years old. I was a part of a church called the Red Bank Cumberland Presbyterian Church, where I spent a ton of time. It was just any time the door was open and I was invited, even when I wasn't invited, I was there. There were a lot of people there who really loved me and cared for me. One of the sovereign themes in my life, of the Lord, is that He provided, family and support for me when I did not have family and support. So my mom is a narcissist. She's kind of the worst. That's just the simplest way to put it. She's really, really selfish, didn't really care about me, really just wanted me to be whoever she wanted me to be, and I, as the strong-willed, wonderful person that I am, did not want to be that. So she didn't like me very much, so I spent a ton of time with other people. So the church that I grew up in was awesome. I learned a lot of really foundational theology and doctrine. I was part of an awesome youth group. There were a lot of people, men and women, who poured into me and spoke life into me. And when I was about 14 years old is when I'd say I really started to understand what it meant to follow Jesus, and when I really started following Him. And so at that time, I sensed a calling to ministry, to vocational ministry. At that time I wanted to be a missionary because I had no other context for spending my life doing ministry with other people. And so when I said that, nobody batted an eye, nobody asked any questions. They were like, yeah, that checks out, and basically supported me, and they still support me to this day in my ministry. And so that's also where I learned through the teaching of my youth pastor, Jim Buttram, what a congruent life looked like, so that the theology that we learned on paper had to be applied in our lives. And that was something that I learned from a very young age. I'm incredibly thankful for, and it has served me well as I have walked into my adult life, that I can't just say one thing in this context and live another over here. It just doesn't work. So through that understanding of theology and faith is how I came to choose my college. So I kind of knew what I wanted to study. I wanted to do film production and stuff, but I didn't really know where I wanted to go to school. I had all these crazy aspirations of going to Vanderbilt, a dingbat. Sorry if you're an Ivy League person, that's fine. It's just not me. And so I ended up going to Middle Tennessee State, primarily because it was free when I went there. Not the school, I just got to go for free. So I was like, great, sounds good. Don't want student loans. So I went there, ended up changing my major. I have a degree in Spanish, which I don't use very much here. If you know anybody that needs help, hit me up. I'd love to use it. But there I got involved in the Young Life community. That was kind of my first exposure to it. In high school, I had done it a little bit. I went to camp, but wasn't super invested in the community. But in college, I was really welcomed in. It was one of the first places that I was wanted, affirmed just as a person, that they wanted me there. They didn't really care that I was kind of messed up and didn't know how to have friends. And I decided to become a Young Life leader when my area director shared the story of the calling of Levi in Matthew 9. where Jesus is teaching to the Pharisees, and they're asking him, he's like, why are you spending time with all these like unsavory people? Why are you spending time with these people that don't have their life together? And Jesus said, it's not the healthy you need a doctor, but the sick. Come and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. He's quoting Hosea 6:6. When Hosea is talking to the people of Israel with all of their stuff that they're doing to try to be holy, and he's like, hey, this doesn't matter. What matters is that you move towards people that need it. And for me, a lot of things fell into place right then, and that is why I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to spend my life in ministry to people that don't know Jesus. I want to spend my life in ministry to people that are unlikely to know Jesus and are uninterested in following Jesus. And that led me through my Young Life community to do a program called Discipleship Focus, which is where I met Josh. It's a summer program for young adults. Highly recommend it. But it was the first place where I felt welcomed, wanted, and like I belonged from the instant that I walked in there by everyone in the community. And that was due to the leadership of Dennis and Shanna Fuller, who directed the program at the time. They showed me incredible grace when I didn't deserve it. They taught me incredible foundational truth that I don't think I would have learned otherwise, and that still influences how I lead and how I live today. So from there, when Josh and I met, I never wanted to get married. I think if you don't know anybody who's the child of a narcissistic parent, it's extremely normal for us to not want to get married and not want to have children, which is absolutely true about me, because we have no context for what to do with that. We don't know what that means. We don't know how to live that out. And we're just not interested. It's really scary. So Josh is incredibly persistent if you don't know him. And he was like, I think that we should get married. And I was like, I think that we shouldn't. And he was like, no, I think we should get married. So again, another sovereign theme in my life is my obedience to the Lord, regardless of what I want to do. And so that was another place where I was like, well, I feel like I should, okay, if this is what we're supposed to do, then this is what we'll do. Regardless of what I wanted, because I just didn't, I would have just stayed single, and I'd be living in Nashville translating for refugees right now, which would have been fine, but it's not what God had for me. So then I moved here. Josh already lived here, and that was in 2012. We got married. So like I said, lived here for 10 years. I spent a couple years kind of figuring out how I was going to work with my degree in Spanish, and very few Spanish-speaking people in this area. And so after a couple years, I started working for Young Life, a ministry I loved and volunteered for. But the church that we were a part of at that time and my boss were both horrible institutions. It was terrible for me. I was treated poorly as a woman. I was treated poorly as a woman who wanted to do ministry. My boss lacked integrity. He also, I would say, was a narcissist, extremely selfish. His ability to twist the truth was really damaging to me and to other people. But I also knew that it's what God wanted me to do. So I remained faithful, and despite a terrible work environment and a really poor church environment, like I was talking about, not wanting to be a parent, not wanting to get married, and walking into a church that I would say idolizes those things, as you can imagine, was incredibly isolating. It was incredibly difficult. I was vilified and made to doubt my own intuition and my own story, and I wasn't supported at all, which just put me right back into my place that I was when I was 8 years old and had no support and didn't know what I was doing. But through a series of unfortunate events and the sins of other people, the Lord used those things for my good. My boss moved across the country. Praise God, I never have to see him again. Well, sometimes. And we left that church because I realized a lot of things that were damaging to me, that were damaging in the theology, that were making me doubt my calling and my career, the thing that I had chosen to do, that I knew God had gifted me for. It all blew up, and for the first time in 8 years, I felt affirmed and validated. I felt seen. I felt known, because God used horrible things, my own suffering, and then also the sins of others, to teach me who he is, to teach me about his faithfulness, to teach me about his goodness, and to teach me how to listen to his voice, and to teach me what his voice sounds like and what the twisted lies of people who might mean well, but who are just hurting people. And so now I think I can stand here and say that I know my gifts, I know my calling clearly. I'm able to discern God's voice. I know where he leads me. And that is because I've been obedient to him regardless of my circumstances. And it's because he gave me community and support when I lacked an actual, like, home base of a family. And so then that's when we started coming to Northstar Pulaski. Because our friends, the Claytons, Jason and Carolyn, were like, hey, we're doing this micro-church thing. I was like, sounds great. And so we started showing up. Really love the vision of Northstar Pulaski to teach people to live missionally. And so that just means, like, every day is ministry, every day is mission. I felt like my insight and my giftings weren't seen as threats for the first time in a really, really long time. So I've really enjoyed getting to know y'all and not feeling like I'm some sort of weird outsider has been incredibly refreshing to me. I think there's a really awesome vision here for authentic relationships, for discipleship, for congruent faith, which brings me all the way back to the beginning of my story of knowing that we can't just say one thing and live another. And finally, just the freedom to innovate and be creative. Like I said, I work for Young Life. It's kind of what we do. I'm a college director. There's no playbook. I just make a bunch of stuff up all the time. So I feel very comfortable in that environment, which is why I've really loved being a part of church here. We love hosting the Radford Microchurch. Josh and I prayed for a big house where we could host people and where people could live with us, and the Lord gave it to us, even though it is a death trap. It's a death trap. It's on the east end of Radford, so everything over there is a death trap. But we're incredibly thankful, and we love having people over into our death trap. Just join us. It's a party in there. You never know what you might find. Just open up a wall. You never know. But in closing, I want you to hear three things. God is faithful and God is good regardless of our circumstances. Regardless of the difficulty in my life, the abuses of others, and the problems that I caused myself, God was still good and God was still faithful to me. Obedience to the Lord yields fruit, the fruit of the Spirit, not prosperity or success. I would say my life is an abject failure in the eyes of many people, including some extended members of my family who look at what I do. It's an abject failure. I don't even have success by any metric that you could come up with in terms of numbers or like people still following Jesus after college. It's like all kind of a mess. But I think that the Lord has yielded the fruit of the Spirit in me and in the lives of those I'm closest to. And so obedience to Him is always going to yield the fruit of the Spirit. And finally, the Lord has taught me through many years. My dad used to always talk to me about Matthew 6, where Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, is telling his followers not to worry. At the end, he's wrapped up all this teaching, and he's like, don't worry about your life, right? And he teaches them, he says, this is a very Jesus thing, right? He's just sitting there, he's on the mountain, he's been talking for like an hour, and then he's like, look at the birds. And he's like, look at the flowers. And he like just encourages people to lift their eyes from whatever they're looking at and to see the world around him and to see that God provides for the flowers of the field. God provides for the birds of the sky. Aren't you worth more than they, he says. And he says, so do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles eagerly seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, or do not worry about tomorrow. For tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And I think that has been my reminder to myself when things are difficult and painful and when I don't understand. So, thanks for listening. Like I said, if you have any questions, please let me know. I think the worship team is going to come on up, and we're going to sing some songs. Yeah.